The sail pens at Antelope Wells filled early that first warm week of calving. Wyoming lay wide under a hard blue sky. The sage ran gray-green to the foot of Stone Butte. The wind came off the flats, smelling of dust and new grass. It was the kind of morning that made men talk. Buyers stood along the rails. Cattlemen leaned on the top board with their hats pushed back. They traded weather and prices. They sized up the spring stock and each other. Hazel Vickery came down the street with 2 butter crocks wrapped in a clean cloth. She did not hurry. She never did. She was a straight-backed woman near 26. Her hair was ash brown, pinned plain. Her eyes were a clear gray that took a man's measure without heat. Her hands were a worker's hands. Her dress was good cloth, worn thin at the cuff. Folks looked past her the way they looked past a fence post. She was used to it. She had a stall to keep and a price to name. She meant to be home before the milking. The talk at the rail was loud enough to carry. Vickery girl's holding that Twin Springs claim alone since her daddy died, a buyer said. Year now. Can't last. A woman can't hold water in this country. She'll have to marry or sell. Who'd she marry? Another said and laughed. Cold as a well chain, that one. Never a soft word in her. You'd get better company from the churn. Tate Ashford stood a little apart, as he always did. He owned Stone Butte. It was the biggest outfit in the basin. He held the low water, the long grass, the name his father had made hard. He was a tall man near 36. His hair was dark, going gray at the temples. His eyes were the slate blue of a sky before weather. He did not laugh with the others. He rarely laughed at all. But he heard the joke. He turned his head. He saw the woman with the crocks come even with the rail. I feel sorry for the man who marries her, Tate said. He said it plain, without heat, the way a man remarks on a poor field. The rail went quiet. It was the quiet of men glad a big man's small cruelty was not aimed at them. Hazel heard it. She was near enough that she could not have missed it. She did not stop. She did not flush. She set her crocks on the plank counter of the mercantile stall. She folded back the cloth. She looked at Keziah Ostler, who kept the store. $2 the crock, Hazel said. Same as last week. The Denver buyer takes all you can't sell before noon. He will, and gladly. Keziah was a wide, dry old woman with a tongue like a rasp. She had heard Tate, too. She looked once down the rail, then back. Pay them no mind. A cheap word costs a man nothing. That's why he gives it away. I have a milking, Hazel said. That was all. She left the crocks and walked back up the street. She did not look at the rail, but her jaw was set. At the wagon she stood a moment with her hand flat on the sun-warm board, breathing slow before she climbed up. A cheap word costs a man nothing. It cost her something. She would not let that be seen. Twin Springs sat 4 miles out. It lay where the draw came down off the bench, where the ground stayed green when the flats burned brown. 2 springs rose there. That was the whole worth of the place. The near one everybody knew, a good steady seep that filled the stock pond. The far one lay up under the cut bank. It was higher, colder, older. It fed the ditch that watered her hay meadow. It turned the cold trough where she set her cream to raise. Her father had dug that ditch when Hazel was a girl. Alton Vickery had put the water to work with his own hands. He had built the head gate himself, a plank gate with an iron latch he forged crooked so that it stuck. It had stuck for 17 years. It stuck yet. No hired man had ever thrown it. You had to lift the bar a hair, drop it a quarter turn, Then knock the heel of your hand against the cold iron at the one spot the rust had worn. Her father had taught her the knack when she was 9. She could work it in the dark. She was the only soul living who could. She worked it now in the last light. She freed the water down the ditch and stood, while the cold ran singing into the meadow. The cows came up for the evening milking. Duchess came first, as always, a broad red cow with opinions, who would not give down for any hand but Hazel's. Then the rest, patient in the dusk. "Cold as a well chain," Hazel said to the cow, and almost smiled. "They're not wrong. I'll give them that much." She milked. She strained the milk into the flat pans and set them in the cold trough. She skimmed the morning's cream. She worked the churn until the butter broke. Then she washed it, salted it, and printed it with the wooden mold her mother had cut, a plain sheaf of wheat. County-famous butter, folks said, when they said anything kind. It was the one thing they would grant her. The Vickery butter took the ribbon at the fair 3 years running. A man would praise the butter and pass the woman who made it. He never once thought the two were the same. She banked the fire. She ate standing. She was asleep before the moon cleared the butte. She was up before it set, because the cows did not care what any man had said at a rail. Tate Ashford did not think of the woman again that day. So he told himself, at least. He rode home to Stone Butte in the dark. The big house stood on the rise, stone-built, his father's monument cold in every season. Tate had grown up in it. He had watched his father take water from smaller men with a smile and a paper. Old Ashford had held the low ground of the whole basin. Everything above it drank at his leave. He had made a boy learn that a soft man is a robbed man. He had made a wife learn to keep her grief quiet. Tate's mother had gone gray young in that house. She had died turned to the wall, and his father had called it a weakness in her blood. Tate had sworn a private oath as a young man. He would be fair. He would not be his father. But he would never again stand in a room and watch feeling make a fool of someone he loved. So he held everyone at the length of his arm. He ran the best outfit in the country. He was respected. He was alone. He told himself the arrangement suited him. His foreman Hiram met him at the barn. "Dorsey Vickery come by," Hiram said. "Left word he wants to talk water. Says there's money in it for Stone Butte." "What money?" "Didn't say. Said he'd call again. Slick sort, all teeth." Tate handed down his reins. "The Vickery place," he said. "The girl's people." "Cousin to her," Hiram said. "Come out from Ohio last fall. Been sniffing round the county recorder ever since. Word is he means to take the Twin Springs water off her." Hiram spat. "Man'd have to be a particular kind to rob his own blood." Tate stood a moment in the barn, dark. He thought, without wanting to, of a straight back going up a dusty street. He thought of a woman who had not flushed when he cut her before the whole rail. He put the thought away. "I'll hear him out," Tate said. "Water's water." Dorsey Vickery came to Stone Butte 2 days on, in a town coat, in a hired buggy. He was smiling before he was down from the seat. He was a soft-handed man of 40. He had his cousin's coloring gone to fat. He talked the way a card sharp deals, easy and quick, always watching your face. He admired the house. He admired the grass. He admired the herd until Tate's patience thinned. "Say your piece, Mr. Vickery." "Straight to it. I like that." Dorsey spread a paper on the porch rail. It was a plat of the basin, the water marked in blue. "You hold the low water, Mr. Ashford. Good senior right, oldest in the county, but you're short in a dry year. You know it. Everybody above you drinks first when they've a mind to." "Twin Springs doesn't touch my water," doesn't it?" Dorsey's smile widened. "That's the beauty of it. The old survey's sloppy. It never distinguished the two springs. On paper, that whole draw reads as one source, feeding down to your creek. If a man filed to consolidate it, called it one system, put a senior claim on the head of it, why, he'd control the flow of the whole basin. Yours with it? Or," he let it sit, "or he'd sell you a share of that control. Cheap, between neighbors." Tate looked at the paper a long time. "The claim's my cousin's," Dorsey said gently. "Hazel's, but she never recorded it right. Never filed the ditch proof. Never proved up the priority date. A woman alone, she let the paper lapse. I've a filing in Cheyenne says the water's mine to consolidate. It'll go through. These things do. I'd rather go into it with Stone Butte behind me than across a fence from you." He folded the plat. "She can't hold it, Mr. Ashford. You know that better than the town does. You said as much at the pens. I heard. I only mean to see it kept in the family, so to speak, and turned to something. There's a railroad grading a spur through here inside 2 years. Water like that will be worth a fortune to the man who holds the paper on it." "And she'd get?" "A fair price for a claim she can't work." Dorsey put on his hat. "Everyone's the better for it. Think on it. I'll want your answer by the county court, first week of autumn. That's when my filing's heard." He climbed to the buggy seat, all teeth. "Between us, she'll be glad to be shut of it. Hard life for a hard woman. Do her a kindness." Tate watched the buggy out of sight. He should have felt nothing. A water right was a water right. His father's son knew the worth of it. He stood on the porch of the cold house. He found, to his own irritation, that he did feel something, and that it was not greed. He rode out to Twin Springs the next morning to see the ground for himself. That was all it was, he told himself. A man looks before he buys. He came on her at the head gate in the early light. She was down in the ditch to her knees in cold water. Both hands were on the old iron latch, and the water was fighting her. Some spring melt had come down heavy in the night. The gate was jammed with the press of it. The ditch was near to topping, near to cutting a new channel that would take the whole rise wide of her meadow, down the draw, lost. She did not see him. She was talking low to the iron the way she talked to the cow. "Come on now, come on. You know me." She lifted the bar a hair. She dropped it a quarter. She struck the heel of her hand against the worn place. The latch gave with a screech. The gate swung, and the water went where she sent it, down the ditch to the meadow, off the cutting edge, saved. She climbed out streaming, breathing hard. Only then did she see the man on the horse above her. They looked at each other. He sat the good horse, dry, the man of the basin. She stood in the ditch, soaked to the thigh, the woman he had pitied a husband out of. "Mr. Ashford." Not a question. Not warm. She wrung out her skirt hem with both hands. "That gate near went," Tate said. "It always near goes. It's gone near going for 17 years. She climbed the bank. "It's my father's gate. He built the latch crooked so no one could throw it but him. Then me." She looked at the iron. "Fool thing to be proud of, a latch nobody else can work. But there it is." Tate got down. He did not know quite why. He went to the gate and put his own hand on the latch. He worked the bar the way he'd just watched her do it. It did not give. He tried again, harder. Nothing. The iron sat like a stone under a strong man's hand. "Lift a hair," Hazel said, watching him with something almost like humor. "Not a lift, a hair. Then drop it a quarter. Then hit the worn place, not the bar." He tried it her way. It did not give for him. It never would. She stood in her wet skirt. She watched the biggest man in the basin fail to open a gate a poor woman opened every dawn. She did not say a word. That was its own kind of word. "I heard your cousin means to take this water," Tate said to change the ground. He does. She wiped her hands. He came to you. I supposed he would. He needs a big name to make it look like sense. She looked at him level. You'll do it then. It's good business. You said so at the pens. A beat. I feel sorry for the man who marries her. I heard that too. You needn't look surprised. I was 10 feet off. There was no self-pity in it. That was what undid him a little. She stated it the way she'd state a price. I spoke out of turn, Tate said. It cost him more than he expected. You spoke your mind. Most don't. She shouldered her wet shawl. The water rises up under that cut bank, Mr. Ashford. The far spring, not the near one. It's a separate rise, older than your creek by the look of the cut, older than your father's claim, if it were ever measured true. It doesn't feed your water. It never did. My cousin's paper says different because the old survey was lazy and nobody's fought it. Well, I'll fight it. I've a milking. She went up the ditch bank towards the cows, straight-backed, dripping, done with him. Tate stood at the gate he could not open. Below him the water ran clean and cold down the true ditch, murmuring, going exactly where a dead man had once bent it to go. He rode home slower than he came. That night he did not tell Hiram what he'd decided, because he had not decided, and that in itself was new. 2 days after, Hazel drove into Antelope Wells with the week's butter, and heard her cousin at his work before she ever saw him. She had pulled the wagon behind the livery to shade the crocks. On the far side of the plank wall, Dorsey was talking to Elam Teller, who ran a little outfit up the North Fork and was always short $1. Hazel did not mean to listen. Then she heard her own name, and she stood still by the wheel. I'll be honest with you, Teller, because we're neighbors. Dorsey's voice was warm as a stove. Once I hold the head of that draw, every man in this basin pays a fair rate for his water, in a dry year, same as a wet. Steady. Businesslike. You'd never be at Ashford's mercy again, nor the Weathers. A poor woman clinging to more than she can work helps nobody, least of all herself. Hazel makes a fine butter, Teller said, uncertain. She does. She'd make it just as fine on a smaller place with a roof over her, and no worry. I mean her a kindness. I mean you one too. Put your mark by mine at the court, and I'll see the North Fork never goes dry on you again. A pause. Softer. Think of your young ones, Teller. A man has to. Hazel drove home with the taste of it in her mouth. He was not lying, quite. That was the trouble with Dorsey. He truly believed a thing was a gift because he had wrapped it kindly. She understood, in the shade behind the livery, that he would not be shamed out of this, and he would not be reasoned out of it. He had to be beaten at it, on the ground, in the open, by the one thing he had never once done in his life. He had to be made to show the county he could not work the water he swore was his. She had until autumn to make them look. We will pause here for just a moment. If you do not want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Word went round the basin the way water finds low ground. Dorsey Vickery meant to take his cousin's springs. Stone Butte might back him. The county court would hear it come autumn. Most folks shook their heads and did nothing. It was not their water. It was not their fight. The woman was cold, folks said, and hard to warm to, so the sympathy that might have run to her ran thin and stopped. But some things had started to turn, small, the way a season turns before anyone will say the word. Tate Ashford took to riding the high line of his range that spring. That put him, more days than not, along the fence above Twin Springs. He told himself he was checking the water in a dry country. He watched a woman work a place alone that would have broken 2 men. He watched her set cream at dawn. He watched her turn hay in the heat of the day. One cold morning he watched her pull a britch calf, sleeves rolled, her arm to the shoulder in the cow, murmuring the whole time, and bring it living into the world. He watched her carry butter to town on the days the Denver buyer came. He watched the town take the butter from her hand and give her nothing back but the $2, and pass her by. Slowly he began to see the shape of a thing he had helped to build and had never once looked at. He was not a man to say so. He said it in the only grammar he had. A load of milled plank appeared at Twin Springs one morning, good dry lumber, stacked neat by the creamery shed, whose roof had gone soft. No note. Hazel stood over it with her hands on her hips a long while. Then she walked the 4 miles into Antelope Wells, up the road to Stone Butte, and found Tate at the corrals. "You left lumber at my place." "Did I?" "Mr. Ashford, I won't be bought. If this is my cousin's business dressed up neighborly, you can haul it back." "It's not your cousin's business." Tate leaned on the rail. He looked at her and made himself say a true thing, which he was out of practice at. "Your creamery roof will go this winter. Then your cream spoils. Then the one thing this county will grant you is gone. I had plank going spare. That's all it is. It isn't flowers." A dry beat. "I wouldn't know where to buy you flowers. I'd buy the wrong ones." Something moved in her face and was mastered. Not softness, recognition. He had not sent her a pretty, useless thing to make himself feel kind. He had sent her the exact makings of the exact roof she needed. He had looked long enough to know which roof, which need. It was the first time in a year a person of standing had truly seen the work of her hands and answered it. "That's a different thing," she allowed. "It is." She stood a moment. "I'll pay you for the plank. In butter, over the summer. I won't owe you." "That's a hard bargain." "I'm a hard bargain." She almost smiled and caught it and turned it into business. "Duchess is springing. If your outfit wants a milk cow's calf off good stock, I'll have one to sell by the fair. That's trade, not charity. I keep my accounts square." She stopped, having said more to him than she'd said to any man in a year, and looked faintly annoyed at herself. "Good day, Mr. Ashford." "Miss Vickery." He watched her go the 4 miles back on foot because she would not take a ride from him. Hiram came and stood beside him. "That's Vickery butter money walking home," Hiram said. "You could have drove her." "She wouldn't have let me." "No," Hiram agreed. "She wouldn't. Particular woman." He scratched his jaw. "Kind you'd want at your back in a dry year, though. She held that place a year the whole county swore she'd lose in a month." He glanced at his boss. "Funny how a thing looks once a man looks at it." Tate did not answer, but he did not disagree. Hiram, who had known him since he was a hard boy in a hard house, marked that and said no more. The trouble with a place worked alone is that it doesn't wait for a convenient day. Duchess calved early, in a cold snap late in the spring, and calved wrong. Hazel found her down in the far corner of the meadow near midnight, straining and beat. The calf hung crossways and neither able. It was too much cow for one woman. She knew it the moment she got her arm in. She needed a second pair of hands to turn the calf while she pulled, or she'd lose them both, the best milker she had, and a calf already promised. She stood in the lantern light with her sleeve wet to the shoulder and did a thing she had never done in a year alone. She got on the mare and rode for help. She rode to Stone Butte because it was nearest, and told herself that was the only reason. Tate came out to the yard in his shirt with a lantern, hair on end, and did not waste a word once he had the shape of it. He saddled in the dark. They rode back to Twin Springs at a hard trot, not talking, the cold coming up off the sage. In the meadow he got down. He stripped his coat without being asked. He looked at the cow, then at her. "Tell me what you need," Tate said. "It's your cow. Your hands know her. I'll do what you say." That, more than the lumber, more than the hat in the tent that was still to come, was the thing she would remember. He did not shoulder in to run it. He did not decide he knew cattle better because he owned more of them. He put his strength at the disposal of her judgment and waited to be told. "Get your hand in beside mine," Hazel said. "There's a foot turned back. When I say, you press the shoulder off, ease it forward, hold it while I bring the leg round. Then we pull with the cow, not against her. Not before I say. She's tired. We get one good try." They worked in the lantern light a long half-hour. It was hard, close, ugly work. She gave the orders low and steady, and he took them without a word or a wasted motion. The cow groaned against the strain. The leg came round at last under Hazel's careful fingers, slick and warm in the cold barn. "Now," she said. "Pull now. With her." They pulled together with the next heave. The calf came in a rush, slick and dark and still, into the cold grass at their knees. It did not breathe. Hazel was on her knees to it at once, clearing its mouth, rubbing hard at its ribs with a fist of dry grass, blowing into the small, wet nose. A long moment. Too long. Then the calf coughed. It shuddered and drew a breath, then another. It shook its wet head against the dark. Hazel sat back on her heels in the freezing grass, streaked to the elbow, and let out one breath that shook. "There," she said, not to Tate. To the calf, or to her father, or to no one. "There now. That's it. That's my girl." Tate, kneeling across the new calf from her, heard the shake in that steady voice for the first time. He said nothing, because he had learned she would not want it named. He only got up, fetched his coat, and laid it over the calf against the cold, an animal he had no share in, on a place that was not his, for a woman who had not asked. Hazel looked at the coat over the calf. Then she looked at him. "You'll want that back," she said. "Keep it on the calf till it's dry," Tate said. "I've others." He looked at the cow, up now and nosing her calf. He looked at the woman. He said the truest thing he had said in years. "You'd have got that alone if there'd been any way to. I know it. You came for me anyway. I won't make more of it than it is. But I'm glad you came." Hazel stood in the lantern light with her father's meadow around her, and did not answer that, because there was no answer that would keep her steady. She banked the fire in the calf's small chest with more grass instead. But when he rode home near dawn, she stood in the yard and watched him go a good while, which was a thing she had not done for any man since her father died. Tate did not sleep when he got back to Stone Butte that dawn. He stood in the cold front room of his father's house, with the calf's dried blood still on his cuff, and found that the house had never felt so empty to him. It was a fine house. It had good glass, and a long table, and a stone hearth a man could stand in. His father had built it to be envied, and it was envied, and no one had ever once been happy in it. Tate had spent 36 years keeping it exactly as cold as the day the old man died. He thought about the woman kneeling in the freezing grass, coaxing breath into a calf that was not worth the trouble by any accounting his father would have kept. She had blown into that small, wet nose like it was the only thing in the territory that mattered. She had said, "That's my girl," to a newborn cow, in a voice that shook. And Tate, who had trained himself out of caring the way another man trains a horse, had stood there and felt the whole careful arrangement of his life come loose at one corner. Hiram found him at the window when the sun came up. "Calf live?" the foreman asked. "It lived." "Good." Hiram poured himself coffee at the stove without being asked. An old liberty. He studied his boss's face a while. "You've the look of a man doing a sum he don't like the total of." "Dorsey Vickery wants my name by autumn," Tate said. "It's good business, Hiram. My father would call me a fool to pass it." "Your father," Hiram said, "called a lot of things by the wrong name. Weakness mostly when it was the other thing." He drank. "You'll do what you'll do. But I've worked this outfit 40 years, man and boy, and I never once seen you ride your own high line every day of a spring for the view. You want my honest word? You already know your total. You're just used to a colder one." He set down the cup and went out to the horses and left Tate alone with the truest sum he had ever refused to finish. He did not finish it that morning. But he did not ride to Cheyenne to sign either, though a careful man would have, and the not going was the loudest thing he had done in years. The county fair came at midsummer, in the heat, with the grass gone gold and the creeks pulled low. All the basin came into Antelope Wells for it. There was stock judging. There was a horse race. There was a long table of preserves and pies and butter under muslin against the flies. There was the butter judging, which the Vickery place had won 3 years running, and which the town cared about more than it would ever admit. Hazel brought 2 prints of butter under a clean cloth, the wheat sheaf pressed sharp. She set them at the end of the table, at the far end, where they put the things they expected to overlook. She stood back against the tent wall where she always stood, out of the light. She waited to be passed over on her way to a ribbon. The judging committee was 3 men and Keziah Ostler, and the 3 men were full of their own importance, as fair committees are. They went down the table tasting, murmuring, writing on cards. They came to Dorsey Vickery's entry. Dorsey had bought a milk cow and hired a girl and put in butter that year to look like a settled man of the basin before the court date. His butter was pale and weepy. The committee was polite about it because he had stood them a dinner at the hotel. "A fine effort," the chairman said. "A fine, settling effort." "My cousin taught me all I know of the dairy," Dorsey said, smiling, loud enough to carry. "Poor Hazel. Such a gift, and no one to share it. I do worry for her, out there alone. It isn't natural, a woman keeping on that way. I mean only to see her looked after." He said it kindly. That was the cruelty of him. He made robbing her sound like rescue. Half the tent nodded along, because it is easy to nod at a well-dressed man who says a hard thing softly. Keziah Ostler tasted Dorsey's butter, set down her spoon, and did not swallow it. "Tastes of the tin," she said. She let that sit. "And of a girl that never learned cold from warm." She moved down the table to the far end, to the 2 overlooked prints with the wheat sheaf. She tasted. Her old face did a thing it rarely did. It eased. "Well," Keziah said, into the whole tent. "That's butter." The chairman came and tasted. His eyebrows went up. The second man tasted. Then the third. A little crowd gathered, the way a crowd gathers when a settled thing turns out otherwise. Tate Ashford stood at the tent door, out of the heat. He watched the exact moment a room began to look at a woman it had spent a year looking past. "Whose is this?" the chairman said. "There's no card set out." "There's a card." Keziah did not soften it. "You walked past it, same as you walk past her every market day. It's Hazel Vickery's. Same hand that's took your ribbon 3 years, while you learned her name wrong. She wiped her spoon. Give the woman her blue and quit being surprised. It's tiresome. They gave Hazel the blue ribbon. She came out of the shadow by the tent wall to take it, straight-backed, her face still. The tent that had laughed at the rail in the spring put its hands together for her now. A crowd will always clap for a winner it can finally see. She let them. She did not warm to it. She knew to the penny what a fair day clap was worth from folk who would pass her again on Monday. But one thing she had not looked for. As she turned with the ribbon, Tate Ashford took off his hat. He did it plain, without show, the biggest man in the basin baring his head to the woman he had pitied a husband out of in the spring, before the whole county. It was not much. It was a small courtesy any man might pay a lady, but every soul in that tent had heard what he'd said at the pens. Every soul understood that a man does not bare his head to unsay a thing unless he means to unsay it before them all. Hazel met his eyes across the tent. She inclined her head once. It was the most that had ever passed between them in public, and it set the whole basin talking a new way by supper. Dorsey Vickery watched it too. His smile did not slip, but his eyes went flat and quick, the eyes of a man recounting a sum that has stopped adding the way he needs. "He took off his hat to you," Keziah said after, packing the unsold preserves. "Tate Ashford, to you. I've knowed that man since he was a cold little boy in that cold big house. He don't bare his head for the governor." "He was being decent," Hazel said. "A man can be decent once." "He can. Most save it for company." Keziah tied the box. "That one's not decent for show. His daddy was for show, all the smile in the world over a knife. This one's the other way about, all knife on the outside, and Lord knows what soft thing underneath he spent 30 years not letting anybody see." She looked at Hazel shrewdly. "You'd know something about a soft thing kept where it won't get at." "I keep a dairy," Hazel said. "I don't keep soft things." "Hmm?" Keziah handed her the box. "Your daddy kept one. He kept you. Best butter in 3 counties, and he taught it to a girl of 9 at a gate nobody else could open. He wanted one soul in this world to have a thing that was only hers." The old woman's rasp gentled, just at the edge. "Don't let that Dorsey take the gate, girl. It's not the water. It's the last of your daddy's hands on this earth, that latch. You lose that, you lose more than a hay meadow." Hazel stood holding the box in the hot dusk. For a moment, her clear gray eyes were not steady. For a moment, she was 9 years old again, her small hand under a big, warm one. She was learning the hair lift, the quarter drop, the knock. She heard her father's low voice saying, "There now, that's it. That's my girl. Now it's yours and no one else's." Then she put it away. Because there were cows. Because there were always cows. "I won't lose the gate," Hazel said. "Good night, Keziah." The town turned slow after the fair, the way a heavy wagon turns, but it turned. On the next market day, a thing happened that had never happened before. Mattie Sorrell, who had a place on the east bench and 4 young ones and no time for anybody, crossed the whole width of the street to speak to Hazel at the mercantile counter. "I heard your butter took the blue again," Mattie said, awkward, a woman making herself do a thing. "And I heard what Keziah said about it, about us all walking past you." She looked at her own hands. "My mother made butter. I never could get the trick of the cold. Would you, some market day, if you'd the time, would you show me? I'd pay in eggs." "I've the time," Hazel said, and if her voice was not warm, it was not cold either. "No charge. Bring your churn. It's likely your spring house, not your hands." It was a small thing. but 3 women waiting in the line heard it. By the following week, 2 of them had asked the same. The counter at Keziah's store became, on market days, a place where Hazel Vickery was spoke to instead of passed by. Keziah watched it with a dry satisfaction she would not admit to. "Took them long enough," the old woman said, wrapping a print. "A whole year and a blue ribbon and a rich man's hat in the dirt. Folks in this basin couldn't find water in a full trough without a committee to point at it." But Dorsey had watched the fair too, and Dorsey was not a man to stand still while the ground shifted under him. He doubled his rounds. He stood dinners. He grew warmer and quicker and more full of concern for his poor cousin as the town grew colder to him. And one evening Elam Teller, shamefaced, drove out to Twin Springs to tell Hazel a thing she needed to know. "He's got a lawyer up from Cheyenne," Teller said, turning his hat. "A real one. Says the old survey's plain as day, one source, and no filing of yours to say different. Says the court's bound by the paper, feeling or no feeling. Hazel, folks like you fine now, but liking won't hold water at a hearing. He's going to win it on the paper. I'd not be square with you if I let you walk in there thinking a blue ribbon would save you." Hazel stood in her yard with the evening going gold and took that in. Teller was right, and she knew he was right. The town's new kindness was worth exactly nothing in a court of law. Dorsey held the paper. The old survey said one source. She had a memory of being 9 years old and a latch no one else could throw, and neither of those was a filing. "Thank you, Elam," she said. "That was a hard ride to make. I won't forget you made it." She watched him go. Then she stood a long while looking up the draw towards the cut bank, where the true spring rose cold and separate, and began, for the first time, to work out exactly how a woman proves a thing the paper denies. There came a still evening near the end of that summer, when Tate rode down to Twin Springs, and did not have a reason ready, and did not pretend to. Hazel was on the low step of the creamery shed with a pan of shelled peas, and the light going long and gold across the meadow. She did not tell him to leave. That was as far as welcome went with her, and he had learned to read it. He sat on the chopping block a little way off, hat on his knee, and for a while neither said anything, and the not saying was easy, which was new for them both. "My father died on a good evening like this," Hazel said at last, not looking up from the peas. "Heart, in the hay. I found him at the gate. He'd got it open before he went down. Last thing he ever did with his hands was throw that latch one more time." She shelled a pod. "I don't tell people that. I don't know why I told you." "I'm glad you did," Tate said. He turned his hat. "My mother used to sit out of an evening like this when my father was off the place. Only then. She'd not do a soft thing where he might see it and call it weak. She died the same way. Turned to the wall so he'd not see her go." He was quiet. "I built the whole of my life so no one could ever call me weak like he called her. It's a poor thing to build a life on. I'm only now seeing how poor." Hazel looked up at him then, the peas forgotten in her lap. It was the most a guarded man had ever handed across to her, and she knew the cost of it, being guarded herself. "It's not weak. The soft thing kept safe," she said slowly. "Keziah's right about that much. It's the whole reason to keep the water, not the money, the gate my father's hands last touched." She looked out at the meadow. "I'd not give that up to be safe. I'd rather be poor and hold it. Maybe that's the thing your father never understood, for all his low water. There's things worth more than never being robbed." They watched the light go off the grass together. When he rode home, the peas were long-shelled, and neither had said a word of the court, or the water, or the thing plainly growing between them. But she walked him to his horse, and that was further than she had ever walked with a living man. The summer turned. The grass cured gold, the creeks pulled lower, and men began to watch the sky and the water the way they do when the dry comes on. The question of who held the head of the Twin Springs draw stopped being one woman's trouble. It became the whole basin's arithmetic. If Dorsey Vickery consolidated that water and sold the control to the railroad, every outfit above Stone Butte would drink at a stranger's leave. Even the men who had laughed began to do the sum. Tate did the sum, too. He came out somewhere his father would not have recognized. He rode to Twin Springs on a hot evening near the end of summer. Hazel was setting cream in the cold trough by the true spring, her sleeves rolled, the low sun on the water. She did not tell him to go. "Your cousin's filing is heard first week of autumn," Tate said. "He wants my name on it. Stone Butte behind him." "I know it," she set a pan. "Are you going to give it?" "No." She went still, a pan in her hands. She turned and looked at him. "I've thought on it since spring," Tate said. He took his hat off, though there was no crowd now, only the water, the cows, and her. "Your cousin's right about one thing. That water, held and sold, would make a man rich and safe against every dry year for good. My father would have signed it before breakfast and called it sound sense." He turned the hat in his hands. "I've spent my whole life being careful. I'm good at it. It's a cold way to be rich." He looked up. "The water rises separate under that cut bank. You told me true in the spring. I rode the old survey lines myself. Your father put that water to use before my father ever filed on the creek." "You know what that means?" Hazel said quietly. "I know exactly what it means." He held her eyes. "It makes your claim older than mine, older than any in the basin. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Prove it at the court, and you don't just keep your dairy. You hold the oldest right in this country. Your cousin's paper burns." "I understand water," Hazel said. "I've understood it since I was 9. She set the pan down. "Why are you telling me? It's against your own interest. You could sit still, let Dorsey win, buy a share, and never dirty your hands." "I could." "Then why?" Tate was quiet a moment. The true spring ran cold between them. "Because I said a cruel thing about you at the rail in the spring, when I'd never spoke 10 words to you." His voice did not rise. It was steadier than she had ever heard it, which in that guarded man was the same as breaking. "I've spent a summer watching you hold a place alone that the whole county said would break you. I watched you take a breech calf living out of a cold cow with your own 2 arms. I watched you make the best thing this basin's got out of grass and patience. You gave it a name and a wheat sheaf. You never once asked a soul to be sorry for you." He stopped. Started again. "I was wrong about the man who marries you, Miss Vickery. He'd be the luckiest fool in the territory. I wanted to say it to you plainly before I ever said it at the court. That's all. I'll help you keep your water if you'll let me. I'll ask nothing for it. If you'd rather do it alone, I'll stand back and let you because it's yours." The cows shifted in the dusk. Hazel Vickery, who had not let one word of the whole hard year be seen on her face, stood at her father's spring with her guard down for the length of one breath. It was a long breath. "That's a great deal of words for a man who deals in 2, she said at last, unsteady. "It's the whole year's worth," Tate said. "I don't expect I'll have more for a while." She almost laughed. She did not. She picked up her pan, because it was that, or let him see the rest. "Come to the court, then," she said. "Stand where the town can see you stand. But the water's mine, Mr. Ashford, and the proving of it is mine. If I keep it on my own 2 feet. I've held it a year without you. I'll hold it now." "I'd expect nothing else," Tate said. The best hand in the basin. That landed harder than any pretty word ever spoken to a soft girl. Best hand in the basin, said of her by the man who held the standing. She turned quick to the trough, so he would not see it land. Autumn came in early to the high country, gold and hard-edged, the cottonwoods along the draw turning the color of old brass. The first week of it brought the county court to Antelope Wells. With the court came the hearing of Dorsey Vickery's filing to consolidate the Twin Springs water and hold the head of the whole basin. But before the court, the basin raised a barn. Stone Butte had lost its big hay barn to a lightning fire in the summer. By the custom of the country, the neighbors came to raise the new one before the weather closed. Every outfit sent hands and wagons. The women set a long table under the cottonwoods. It was the great gathering of the year, the whole basin in one place, the day before the water would be decided. Tate Ashford, who had never in his life asked the county onto his ground for anything but business, had let it be known that all were welcome. That was itself a thing folks remarked on, and he had done it for one reason he did not name. Hazel came because Keziah made her come. "You'll bring butter, and you'll stand in the light for once in your life," the old woman said. "Tomorrow they decide your water. It's a sight harder to rob a woman you broke bread with yesterday. Let them see you. That's half the fight. You've never once fought it." So Hazel came. She set her butter on the long table, not at the far end this time. The basin ate it and knew whose it was now. A man who had passed her 100 market days said, "Fine butter, Miss Vickery," and meant it. She found it did not fix the hard year, but it did not hurt either. The frame went up through the morning. Men on the plates, women passing the dinner, the whole hum of it. Dorsey Vickery was there in his town coat, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, laying the ground soft for tomorrow. He told anyone who'd listen how it grieved him to see his poor cousin cling to a thing too big for her, how he only meant her comfort. Some still nodded. Fewer than in the spring. The trouble came at noon. It came, as trouble does, from the sky and the water at once. A hard autumn cloudburst had stood over the bench since dawn, unseen behind the butte. It broke loose all at once down the draw, a wall of storm water off the high ground, the way the dry country floods when it floods, sudden and mean. Word came down with a rider, white-faced from the flat. "The draw's coming down big. It'll top the Twin Springs gate and cut new channel. Take the whole rise down the low draw through the calving flat. There's 40 head of Stone Butte stock on that flat." The barn raising broke apart into a run for horses. 40 head of prime stock stood to drown or be swept if the water jumped its ditch and came down the low draw in a wall. The only thing between the flood and the flat was the old head gate at Twin Springs. Thrown right, it would send the storm water wide down the true ditch, off the flat, safe. Thrown wrong, or not at all, the water would top it, cut, and come down on the stock. No hand in the basin could throw that gate but one. Men reached the headgate ahead of her on fast horses, Tate among them, Dorsey's 2 hired men too. The ditch was already boiling. The old plank gate shuddered under the press. The water was an inch from topping. A big man had both hands on the crooked latch and could not move it. Another shouldered him off and tried and failed. Tate himself was in the ditch to his waist, hands on the iron his father's money could never buy the trick of, straining, the water rising over his forearms, the latch a stone. "It won't throw," a man shouted. "Break the gate! Axe it!" "You axe it! It cuts new channel here and takes the flat anyhow," Tate shouted back. "It has to swing, not break. Where's—" Hazel came off her mare at a run and into the ditch beside him. The cold storm water was to her waist and climbing. She put the men out of her way with her shoulder, no ceremony. She got both hands on her father's iron in the boil and the roar. She bent her head to it the way she'd bent it 10,000 dawns. "Come on now," she said to the latch, low, under the roar, where only the water and the man beside her could hear. "You know me. You've always known me. Lift a hair, drop a quarter." She struck the heel of her hand against the worn place her father's hand and hers had worn smooth over 17 years. It was the one spot on the whole earth that answered. The latch screamed and gave. The gate swung wide against the flood. The stormwater caught the true ditch and went where a dead man had bent it to go, wide down the meadow line, off the calving flat, harmless, singing its cold, mean song into the hay ground, and gone. 40 head of stone butte stock stood dry on the flat below. Because a poor woman had opened a gate the richest men in the basin could not. She climbed out, streaming, shaking with cold and effort. The whole basin stood on the ditch banks in the thinning rain and looked at her. There was not one soul on that bank now who did not understand exactly what they had spent a year overlooking. Tate climbed out beside her, soaked to the chest. He did not take her arm because he had learned she would not want it. He stood next to her, shoulder to shoulder, dripping, and he said one word, and he said it so the bank could hear. Hazel. Just her given name, the first time he had ever used it. Staged as plain as a man can stage a thing, before the county, after a thing fairly done. It was worth more than a speech. It said, "This is not the cold Miss Vickery you pitied a husband out of. This is Hazel. I have earned the right to say it. I mean everyone here to know I've earned it." "Mr. Ashford," she said back, shaking, and there was a crack in her steady voice at last, one hairline crack. "You'll catch your death. Get out of that wet coat." Which, from Hazel Vickery, was very nearly a declaration. Keziah Ostler on the bank heard it for what it was, and laughed out loud in the rain. The court sat the next morning in the front room of the Antelope Wells Hotel. The circuit man was up from Cheyenne, a dry, careful fellow named Selkirk, with spectacles and a way of reading paper as if it might bite. The room was full. The whole basin had come, wet-booted from yesterday's flood, to hear the water decided. Dorsey Vickery sat forward in his town coat with his filing and his lawyer and his easy smile. Hazel sat straight-backed and alone at the near table, because she had said the proving was hers. Tate Ashford stood along the back wall, where the county could see him stand, which was the whole of what she'd asked of him. Dorsey's lawyer went first, and it was smooth. The old survey, he said, described one water source in that draw, feeding down to the Basin Creek. A single system. Miss Vickery, a woman alone, had never filed her ditch proof nor established a priority date. So she held no perfected right at all. His client, Mr. Vickery, of the same family, proposed only to consolidate the source, perfect the claim, and put the water to its highest use, to the benefit of the whole basin and the coming railroad. He said benefit 4 times. He said poor Miss Vickery twice, gently, the way you speak of the dead. Selkirk looked at the old plat over his spectacles. "The survey does read as one source," he said. "Miss Vickery, you've made no filing to establish a senior right. On this paper, I'm bound to find the source unperfected and open to Mr. Vickery's consolidation." He set the plat down. "Unless you can show me the paper says wrong. Can you?" The room went quiet. This was the moment the whole county had come for. This was the moment a woman alone at a table was supposed to have no answer. and lose softly to a well-dressed man. Hazel stood. "The paper says wrong," she said. Clear, plain, no tremor. The old survey was run in a wet year by a man who never left his horse. He saw one draw with water in it and drew one source. There are 2 springs in that draw. The near one is a shallow seep. The far one rises separate, up under the cut bank, cold, from a different water, older. It does not feed the basin creek. It never has. She did not hurry. My father put that far spring to beneficial use with his own hands. The spring I was 9 years old. He dug the ditch. He built the head gate. That is 11 years before Mr. Ashford's father ever filed on the Basin Creek. It is 16 years before my cousin got off the train from Ohio. A stir went through the room. That makes the Twin Springs water the oldest right in this basin. Not my cousin's to consolidate, not anyone's to sell. Mine, by my father's hand and my own, put to use every single day for 17 years, without one day's lapse. Fine words, Dorsey's lawyer said, rising. But words. Where's the proof of the date, of the separate source? A ditch proof? A survey? A witness? A woman's memory of being 9 years old is not a filing, sir. No, Hazel said, it isn't. So I brought the proof. She had asked 2 things of the court that morning. Selkirk, a careful man who did not like a lazy survey, had granted them both. The first was the ground itself. The flood of the day before had opened the true cut bank clean. Any man who had ridden out could see with his own eyes that the far spring rose separate and cold, from a different water than the near seep. Half the men in the room had ridden out. Half the men in the room had seen it. They shifted. They looked at each other. A few nodded, because a thing you have seen with your own eyes the day before is a hard thing for a lawyer to talk you out of. The second was the gate. The head gate my father built stands where the true spring rises, Hazel said. He forged the latch himself, crooked, so it would throw for no hand but his. Then he taught the throw to me, and to no one else living, the spring I was 9. He meant one soul on this earth to hold that water and know it was hers. She looked at Selkirk. My cousin says the claim is his. Then let him work the gate. Water rights in this territory run to beneficial use. They run to the hand that actually holds and works the water, not to the paper, to the hand. Her voice stayed level. Yesterday the whole basin watched every strong man here try that latch in the flood and fail. They watched me throw it and turn a flood off Stone Butte's calving flat. Ask them, ask any man on that bank. The water answers one hand in this county. If the right runs to the hand that holds the water, sir, then there is only one hand it can run to. It is not my cousin's. He has never once in his life been able to open the gate to the thing he swears is his. The room was dead silent. Selkirk looked at her a long moment over his spectacles. Then, slowly, he looked at Dorsey Vickery. Mr. Vickery, Selkirk said mildly, can you work your own headgate? Dorsey rose, smiling, but the smile had gone thin at the corners. For the first time, the easy, quick eyes had nowhere easy to go. The latch is defective, Your Honor. Anyone can see it wants replacing. A mechanical fault is hardly— It's not a fault, Selkirk said. By her account, it's a lock. Her father's lock. The key is a thing he taught his daughter, and no one else. He almost smiled himself, dry as Keziah. That's the most perfected proof of beneficial use I've had put before me in 20 years on this circuit, Mr. Vickery. I've heard a great deal of paper. Can you work the gate, yes or no? There it was. the one moment the human antagonist has to break. Dorsey Vickery stood in his good town coat before the whole basin he had meant to hold. He could not say yes, because 100 people had watched him fail to say it in the flood. He could not bear to say no. His soft hand shook once on the table. For just a breath, the smooth was gone. What showed underneath was not a monster, but a frightened, overreaching man who had bet everything he did not have on a woman being too small to fight. It was almost sad to see, which was the worst of it. "I came out here with nothing," Dorsey said, low, and it was the truest thing he had said in the county. "Ohio ate me alive. This was to be I only wanted a thing that was mine." He looked at his cousin. "Same as him, same as your daddy. I only came poorer, and later, so it's robbery when I do it." "It was always robbery," Hazel said, not unkindly. "His and mine both, if it comes to that. All of us drinking off dead men's ditches." She held his eyes. "The difference, Dorsey, is that I dig mine, and I work my own gate. You wanted the water without the dawns. There's no such water in this country. There never was. Selkirk found for Hazel Vickery. The Twin Springs water was ruled a separate and older source, perfected by 17 years of beneficial use, held by the hand that worked it, hers and no one else's, the oldest right in the basin. Dorsey's filing was struck. The railroad would deal with her or not at all. She had come into that room the poorest landholder in the county. She walked out holding the most senior water in it. The whole basin stood as she passed, hats coming off down the length of the room. The room that had looked past her for a year was on its feet to watch her go by. Tate Ashford came off the back wall and walked out into the autumn sun beside her, not touching her, letting her set the pace, as he had learned. They stood in the gold light outside the hotel. The county spilled out behind them, loud now, remaking the whole year's story into one where they had all been on her side the entire time, the way a town does. "You didn't need me," Tate said. "Any of it. You stood up and you won it yourself." "No," Hazel agreed. "I didn't need you." She looked up at him, clear-eyed. "You stood at the back wall the whole time and never once tried to fight it for me. Do you know that's the reason I might have you, Tate Ashford? Any other man in this basin would have jumped up to save the poor woman and taken the win for his own. You let it be mine. You only stood where I could see you stand." A pause. "That's a rare thing in a man, one who'll hold your coat and not your hand, till you've done the thing yourself." "I had a good teacher," Tate said. "I watched you fail to be saved for a whole year." Something in her cracked and let a little light through. This time she let it show, because she had decided to. "My cousin was half right, you know," she said. "About one thing. It isn't natural keeping on alone, hard as I keep on. I never minded it. I want to say that plain, so you don't get it twisted into rescue. I wasn't drowning. I'd have held that place till I died and been content." She took a breath, the way she took the latch, a hair, a drop, a knock. "But I've watched you a year too, Tate. I watched a cold man ride his high line just to be near a poor woman he'd wronged. I watched him send her a roof instead of flowers, because he'd looked long enough to know she needed a roof. I watched him take his hat off in a tent full of people who'd have followed him if he'd kept it on. I watched him stand at a back wall and let her win her own water." She looked at him a long moment. Then she made her choice, plainly, in her own low, steady voice, as no other soul could make it for her. "I'll marry you, not because I need holding, because I'd rather do the next stretch of dawns with you across the fence than the whole rest of them alone. Those are my terms. The dairy stays mine. The water stays mine. The gate stays mine. I come to you a landholder in my own right. Or I don't come at all." Tate Ashford stood in the autumn's sun and let it happen. He had sworn in a cold house never to let feeling make a fool of him. He let it now, gladly, before the whole town. "You come to me the senior water right in the basin," he said. "The best hand in it. The only soul who can open my own floodgate. You're the one person I've met in 36 years I'd rather stand behind than in front of." His voice was not quite steady, that guarded man. "Yes, on your terms. All of them. I've no better ones to offer." "Then that's settled," Hazel said, as if she'd sold him a crock of butter, and turned toward her wagon. Because there were cows. Because there were always cows. But at the wheel, she stopped. She looked back. For the first time since the spring, she smiled at him full, the smile the whole county had sworn she did not own. "I feel sorry for the man who marries me," she said. "I hear he's a hard bargain." "I hear he's the luckiest fool in the territory," Tate said. They were married at the turn of autumn, in the little church at Antelope Wells, with the cottonwoods gone full brass along the draw, and the whole basin packed into the pews. It was the same county that had laughed at the rail in the spring. It was the same man who had said the cruel thing over her head as she passed with her crocks. He stood at the front now in his good dark coat, gray at the temples. When Reverend Whitmore asked him the question, Tate Ashford said the vows in a clear, plain voice that carried to the back wall. The man who dealt in 2 words at a time spent all he had. There was not a soul in that church who had not heard him in the spring, and not one who did not mark the whole circle of it closing. By autumn, he was the one saying the vows. The basin would tell it that way for years. The supper after was held on the long benches under the changing cottonwoods, and half the county brought a dish to it. Mattie Sorrell had baked 3 days for the pies, and told anyone who paused that she had always known how it would land. Elam Teller came in his one good collar and shook the groom's hand a beat too long, the way a man does when he means an apology he cannot say. The Stone Butte hands sat mixed among the Twin Springs crew, and no one troubled to sort them back out. It was a plain frontier wedding, without a speech or a fuss, and it suited the 2 of them down to the ground. Keziah Ostler cried and denied it. Duchess the cow was left unmilked one evening for the first time in her life, and had opinions. Dorsey Vickery had taken the train back east, a poorer and quieter man. Hazel had, at the last, sent him his fare and a crock of the good butter, which was more mercy than robbery earns, and exactly as much as she had to give. Hazel Ashford kept her own name on the Twin Springs claim, senior water right of the basin. She kept her dairy. Most of all, she kept the gate. She works it yet, every dawn. Now a tall, gray-templed man rides down the draw with her in the cold light, and stands by while she does it, holding the horses. He gave up trying to learn the throw long ago, because some locks are only ever meant for one hand. But the flood that autumn had done a thing to the old iron. It worked it, seated it, wore the last of the crooked out of it. The latch her father forged to stick for 17 years. The latch no strong man in the county could throw, swings clean now under her hand at the first touch, easy as a blessing. She no longer wrestles it in the dark. She lifts it light. She sends the water down to the meadow that feeds them both. And more mornings than not, she leaves the headgate standing open behind her in the gold light. She has no more need to fight the thing shut against the world. The water is going where it always meant to go, to both their places at once. There is no longer any hand it needs keeping from. And that was the story of Hazel and Tate. Tell us in the comments where you are listening from and what this one stirred in you. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story.